Excellent. I didn't even have to announce it. Okay. This meeting is being recorded. It will be posted on the NEWRA.org website. Just as a reminder, we say at all of our meetings, please be respectful when speaking to your neighbors and our guests tonight. And let's allow everyone enough time to speak. That is, we have a lot of people who are going to be asking questions. John Romano is here tonight from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, and Ricardo Patron is here tonight from Councilor Lydia Edwards' office. Next month, we are going to continue our mayoral candidate series. City Councilor Michelle Wu will be here, and as will John Barros. At our October 12th meeting, Andrea Campbell and John Santiago will join us. We have reached out to the Janie campaign and not gotten a response. If anyone on this call has a contact there, I would please put it in the chat, somebody in the campaign, because we'd really like to invite her. We have invited her. We'd really like her to come to NEWRA as well. There was a DEP hearing this week. Dave, you were there. I was there a little bit in the evening to talk about their amendments to the, you know what, Dave, do you mind? Can you kind of give a little quick update? We have a few minutes.
Well, people may remember the Harbor Garage project, and that NEWRA had sent in a comment letter on the environmental notification form several months ago on that project. That's a project that will replace the Harbor Garage with a 600-foot high tower, combination of hotel, residential, commercial tower. And there were many reasons why NEWRA is, and many other organizations are concerned about that, right on the waterfront, right in front of the aquarium and so forth. More recently, a judge made a decision that the state's approval of the plan, not only for the project, but for the entire waterfront district there, that the plan submitted by the city should not have been authorized by the Secretary of Environmental Affairs. And there were other problems that the judge pointed out. This gives us an opportunity to push the city and the state to require a additional review, not going back to the drawing board, but there are a lot of concerns raised that were not evaluated by the BPDA during the planning process. So many organizations are asking for the MHP, the Municipal Harbor Plan for that particular area, not go forward, not be approved until further public process is conducted. There are other MHPs that fell under the judge's decision in other parts of Boston and in other parts of Massachusetts, but we're most concerned with the one at the downtown waterfront. So the hearing was about regulations, state regulations that the Department of Environmental Protection is proposing to correct the situation. But the regulations do just one thing. They rubber stamp what was previously approved without any additional review. And there'll be a couple more hearings in mid-July. No date yet on those, same type of hearings. And then at the end of July is the deadline for public comments. NEWRA, I expect, will be submitting a comment letter on the proposed regulations. That would have to be authorized by our members at our next meeting, which is July 8th.
It's July 8th, yeah.
July 8th. So a few of us who will draft that letter need to do so by about the end of June to be able to circulate it to NEWRA members prior to the meeting on July 8th.
Yep, we will send out an email with a link to the letter and put it on the website so that everybody can read it.
So make sure that's an agenda item on July 8th.
I'm actually building the agenda right now for the 8th. Perfect. Thank you. All right, so first up tonight, our friends from Arrow Street's nonprofit environmental design group, Love Your Block. They are going to show us their slides. They did a survey. They got a pretty good response on the survey about what people would like to see them do with the grant. So I would like to introduce Victoria Wright, Alicia Tremblay, and Claudette. I'm just going to say Claudette. I don't want to mispronounce your last name. Your
Louis
microphone.
Lier. No worries.
Oh, thank you for joining us tonight. And you should be able to share. I opened up the screen sharing. So pop up your slides. Thank you very much.
All right. So Alicia's going to kick this off for us.
All right, so you've heard from us a few times, but we're back. And we're really excited because we feel like we're actually starting to make some headway with this. We won this grant about a year ago, and through all of the setbacks and the challenges, we are so excited to finally be working with you and getting some feedback from you guys, and presenting some of our ideas and a summary of basically what we got from the survey we sent out to you. If you want to go to the next slide. We have 3 parts to this. We have 3 strategies after we go over some of the survey results and summaries from that. And then we'll share 3 locations as well. And if you have any feedback, please put whatever you have in the chat. We really want to continue to work with you guys. So if you have any questions, to bring them to the chat. We'll have some time at the end to talk to you guys as well. So we'll start with, if you can go to the next slide, please. The survey overview, results, and just some of what we got out of that. You want to go to the next slide? Perfect. So the first and second question, we asked, what are you most and least interested in? We found that you overwhelmingly are interested in the historical context of the North End, which is awesome. And you're not so interested in the local business aspect of it. The hotels, chain retail stores, not too interested in as well. So we're trying to focus more on the historical context of things. Also the entry and green spaces, if you want to go to the next slide. And some of the historical context that you wanted to be addressed were the communities of the North End, existing buildings and buildings that may not be there any longer. So some of those old historic buildings that have been torn down, and the layers of history and the immigration that has happened throughout the North End. The green spaces as well. Waterfront was a huge topic that was coming up over and over. More trees, less concrete, and something that kind of hits all ages. Go to the next slide. And then we asked, where would green space, where would you like to see more green? Kind of everywhere, right? So the what was it? Good. So the waterfront, again, came up a bunch, but there's also green spaces that are there that might want a little bit more greenery. How can we do that? How can we protect what there is already in the neighborhood? How can we add to that? And if you want to go to the next slide. We asked which historical context is important to you. Again, we found that people felt strongly about everything. So what's already there, what might have been torn down, keeping the history and the charm of the North End and making it feel inclusive to everyone. You want to go to the next slide? And then the following features of the entry, what is important to that? Again, information and signage, that's huge. But also some greenage going into the North End and greenery going into the North End and protecting it, inviting, keeping it inviting, representing what the North End means to you guys. That was something that was also pretty important. We saw across all of your comments. Want to go to the next slide? And then we asked about local businesses, even though that wasn't something that was super important. We still asked about it, but it seemed like the history of the local businesses that have been there for years and years, but the shops that are serving you guys, the community versus just the tourists, that's something that kind of combed through to see that you want something that you guys can use as the local community versus, again, catering towards people that are coming in and out just to see the space once. So kind of a mix of both. How can we do something that caters to both? You want to go to the next slide? And then would you use a QR code? This was basically 50-50. But here's the thing, get your phones ready because we might have something where you can actually try out a QR code, but they can be something that's super dense, something that's not dense. They can give a lot of data, a little data. So we do have opportunities where we can use them in different ways. And again, 50-50. So maybe we can get some more people to say yes to this and understand it a little bit more. Yeah, get your phones out. And the next slide. And then we asked about hidden knowledge in the neighborhood, and we got so many different responses. A lot of it, again, revolved around history or things that were there and aren't anymore, or even the feasts. People come in for those, but do they actually know that there's different feasts? So I think just talking to you guys and getting information about the little hidden pockets of history that might not just be the power of your house, also is, again, across many, many years. And then I'm going to bring this back to Victoria, who will kind of go over next steps from our summary of all of this information.
Thanks, Alicia. And thank you everyone for who, took time to answer the survey. We found it very helpful in determining the next steps. And so now that we've heard back from you, and we want to understand, we know that, both residents and visitors matter, and that history matters. And, North End is distinctive, it's incomparable, unparalleled character of the place matter. It is a special place. And so want to talk about, why, where, and how. So would like to start with just showing two precedents of how what we've collected since history. There are a couple of things that stood out to us. History is very important in this neighborhood, and also having a green space. And so trying to understand, okay, how do we merge all of these things together? History, neighborhood, and technology. And how do we engage both residents as well as visitors? So the first precedence is Atlas Obscura, and it's a website that currently exists. And I can go into that a little later. And the second precedence is looking at the city of Montreal and seeing how they've used technology to bring out the historical context. So with Atlas Obscura, the first precedence, so automatically, this is the North End. It has many different, 14 or so sites that not necessarily everyone knows about. And so these are like the hidden knowledge or the hidden treasures in the North End that someone can easily tap into. And it already exists, it's already a website. And so that was great to find. And then the second precedence, I'm gonna switch over and show you a short video. I'm gonna turn on, oops. It has sound, so just wanna let everyone know that. Hope you can hear it.
I'm not hearing it.
Oh, thanks for letting me know that. Let me start this. Okay.
Now I can hear it.
You can, okay, thank you. All right, so, that's the second precedence, and it just, it's a way to use technology to bring history. And I think one of the comments we received was, understanding the North End, past and present. And so using technology is a great tool, as you saw in the video. And so we have developed 3 design strategies. I think one of the first is, having a place that is welcoming, sort of the neighborhood's front door. Graphic with some graphics, environmental graphics and wayfinding was something that was expressed. And so we kind of honed in on that and thought, well, that's a good place to, has to be one of the strategies. And the second strategy is historical places. North End has a lot of it. And so understanding the vision of, the past and now. And the third is, scales of greenery and how we can extend or expand or enhance the neighborhood's green space. So based on those 3 strategies, which could be used together or separately, not necessarily, I think one of the first thing we thought was, okay, we need to find a place, and we've identified 3 opportunity zones where that could sort of flourish. The first zone is Cross Street and Hanover, and sort of the front door, right? And then the second opportunity zone is at the end of Hanover on Commercial and Hanover Street. And the third opportunity area is North Square or Rachel Revere Park. So in those 3. So so those are the, the 3 opportunity zones we've identified. And the second strategy is, how do we use technology to identify historic places? So using Atlas Obscura or websites that already exist. I know Alicia mentioned earlier, get your phones ready if you're not sure what a QR code is. And so we have this QR code right here. If you have your phones, if you go to your camera setting and you're taking a picture, once you hover over this, it should have I guess Safari should pop up on your screen, and it'll take you directly to Copp's Hill Burial Ground. So QR codes are very easy to use, and there's already a lot of information on the on the internet. And so how can we use what's already existing to give visitors and residents just the richness, just to bring it alive? And one of the things that we really liked from what the city of Montreal did was the past and present, how, someone might have their phone and they pan to one area and see what the city was like at a certain period of time compared to what they're experiencing now. And so it just really brings alive just the richness of the community. The third strategy is green space. How could we use what's existing and, really enhancing it? And already in the North End, there are a lot of flower pots or the flower boxes. And this is also an opportunity we sort of discussed, just maybe how could we embed QR codes on some flower pots in the neighborhood and to give more information, but, having neighbors or different people sponsor or have flower pots, I think also really extends it. So, extending the green space of the North End. So next step. So based on what, we've collected and what we've shared, we would like to hear from you. And, now it's just, we thought it'll be great to just hear from you who are here. If you could, in the chat, Alicia's going to just take quick notes of, what everyone's said, but just a quick vote to see which opportunity zone you believe we should focus on. So the first, I'll say it again, it's, let's see, Hanover and Cross Street. The second is Hanover and Commercial Street. And the third is North Square and Rachel Revere Park. So if you could take just a couple of minutes, or just put in a 1, 2, or a 3 in the chat box, that would help us a lot.
That's great.
And
does anyone have any questions? Well, we'll take a minute, and while everybody puts their vote in the chat. Does anyone have a question? Just raise your hand, or I'm looking to see if nobody has their hands up. I'll just open people's mics. This is great.
thanks, Cheryl.
It's great. You guys.
Sorry, I can't see who's speaking. Oh, thanks, Cheryl.
Cheryl, I know you've done a lot of work on this. I mean, this is you've come back a couple of times and really, tried to get the community the input. Come on, everybody, go into the chat and put it in. We don't have enough votes here.
It looks like David has his hand up.
Oh, hold on. David. There you go. You're open, David.
I was seeking a bit more information about what is proposed within an opportunity zone. Can you define what you're proposing is happening in a zone?
Yes, so essentially, since wayfinding or signage was one of the highest, I guess most people agreed that was important. So within these opportunity zone, we'll have sort of the front door, like a welcoming, a place where, a guest can come and sort of be welcomed into the North End without really speaking to anyone, but understanding there are things that are already set in place that they can experience and feel like, they really know and understand the North End or the neighborhood, the context of the neighborhood. So it might be, let me go back a little bit to the slide. So with the strategies, it could be any 1 or 2 or 3, or all of these strategies that could be used in an opportunity zone. So defining a place, a front door, where it might be someone, I think Hanover and Cross Street is, a lot of people can start like coming through that area because the T is right there. That's a pretty strong pedestrian path. And the historic and using historic context. So there could be a QR code embedded in a wayfinding sign and an explanation of what QR codes are, a map, right? And so being able to show context that's physical, but also can be accessed digitally, because not everyone, is comfortable quite yet with QR codes or the digital world. So I hope that answers your question.
So I'd like to see a few more people vote. With that, you can vote. I can always send this over to you afterwards too, because the chat gets recorded as well. But we don't even have 10 people voting. So keep voting. Thank you. And so next step, what's our next steps with you? You're going to come back and give us a final?
Yeah, so based on what we hear from everyone here, we're gonna just keep going. And we can't thank you guys enough for helping us with the survey, because that was very informative of what you see on an everyday and what you want. So I think our next step is to develop these ideas that we just shared, and perhaps choose a site that we could really develop based on what is said here today.
This is great. We can't thank you enough for doing this grant for us and for this neighborhood, and helping bring our historic experience to everybody. I think what you've done is great. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us, Cheryl.
Oh, we'll talk next week.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So our next guests one of the guests is Joanne Halpin, who is a resident of the North End, and Cece Doucette, who is the director of Mass Save Technology. It's an organization that looks at the installation of 4G and 5G towers and the health implications. And Cece, I know you have some slides, and I know, Joanne, you wanted to say something as well. So let me open up your mics. Cece, you're open. Joanne, you're open. Okay. Take it away. Your mic should be open.
Thank you very much for having me. Yes, I live on Parmenter Street, and the reason I'm here tonight is about the EMF topic, which I was completely oblivious to until I started experiencing a long list of mystery symptoms, mostly neurological. And I researched what causes these things, and I repeatedly found really compelling research that was not industry funded by big telecom that man-made EMFs or electrosmog do cause compromised health, specifically in a lot of mystery symptoms that most doctors don't understand. So if anybody here doesn't understand EMFs, it's electromagnetic frequency. And these can occur naturally in nature, which are harmless, and they can also be man-made. There's all different kinds of man-made EMFs that can compromise our health. And the one I'm focusing on tonight is wireless communication. So what happens with that is you're getting microwave radiation pulsed out to communicate data and messages and text messages and purchases, etc., between devices, routers, cell poles, and cell towers. And that pulsing radiation is what's sending all that data through the air. When I found out about EMFs and started researching and thinking maybe this could be my problem, I decided I was going to take it on board and I would change one small thing at a time just to see if I noticed a difference in my health. And I did. So I kept making the changes and my health just went like this.
Joanne, I'm going to stop you for a second. You're really muffled. Maybe come a little bit closer to your monitor to pick up the sound.
Is that better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, sorry. So
Thank you.
basically, I'll just recap briefly. I came into the knowledge that I have about EMFs by experiencing mystery symptoms. And when I researched that and realized that all the recommendations that I've been seeing in research to help improve your health were real. So my symptoms were validated by the fact that when I started to remediate all of these things, one little tweak at a time, I'm still using technology. I just changed how I'm using it. My health really came back very strongly and very quickly. So it became clear to me that this is a very real thing. And when I found out that these man-made EMFs, they have different realms, but the wireless communication is kind of a big one. And for tonight, I'm here because I found out that big telecom now has permission to install infrastructure, cellular infrastructure on residents' homes. And there'll be no need to get zoning approval. There'll be no need to get your neighbor's approval. And having experienced the effect on my health, I wanted Cheryl to know right away. I wanted the neighborhood to know right away that this is not easy money. This is not free money. This has a dark side. And one thing I will drop in the chat box tonight is going to be a town hall meeting with Pittsfield, Massachusetts. What happened in Pittsfield is happening all over the country and people just aren't hearing about it. But a cell tower went live during COVID lockdown and there was a cluster of sick families that happened immediately. And they've been searching for help and they finally got some help with the Board of Health. So I'm going to drop the link to their Zoom call with leading global epidemiologists that talk about all the research that's been done. It's going to be a great way for anybody that clicks on that link to get up to speed very, very quickly on this topic. And I would recommend starting at the 1 hour and 30-minute mark because it is a long meeting. And I will put that actually in the chat box when to start. It's going to give a very condensed, very clear introduction to this. The first is going to be all the global studies that have been done that are not industry funded to give you the other side of the coin from what you're hearing. It's going to be an expert that has had electromagnetic sensitivity and she's now a specialist in helping people with that. And it's going to tell you how this happens, who's most susceptible, and how you can support that to heal, because it does heal. And the third person in the presentation on the Zoom call has dedicated her life to researching the harms on health from this man-made EMF spectrum of communications. And you're just going to find that it's really easy to understand and you're going to know a lot more about it. So I'll leave that available to everybody.
That would be great if you can put that up in the chat.
I have,
That's great. And
okay.
we need to get to Cece now.
Yes, so I've invited Cece, who is the founder and director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and she is working with all of these global leaders, and she's going to give you all a lot more information with her slides. Welcome, Cece. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. and it's lovely to be here with you all in the North End. I will go ahead and do a screen share.
Should be able to, should be able.
Okay, can everybody see that?
There, now it's up.
Okay, very good. So my name is Cece Doucette, and that MTPW up there just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And when my kids were in school in Ashland, Massachusetts, we kept hearing about this 21st century classroom and how our kids were going to need to have all this great technology to succeed in life. And our budgets were very, very stripped down in Ashland. So as parents, we jumped in and started doing fundraising for things like iPads and Chromebooks and smart TVs and all the wireless infrastructure. And then a girlfriend of mine who's an electrical engineer tipped me off that there could be biological risk. And so I did the deep dive into the science, and I helped Ashland, as it turns out, become the first in the nation to even have baby step precautionary measures posted in all of our classrooms. I then worked with my senator, who's Senate President Karen Spilka, and we have introduced legislation. And I connected with many experts across the world. And out of Europe, we founded a little nonprofit called Wireless Education, where we've distilled this complex issue down into courses that can be completed online in about a half an hour to train schools and families, to train the corporate workspace. And somebody found my work down at the National Institutes of Health, and I was asked to co-chair a technology panel at the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference. And the reason why I include this link, and anything you see with a blue underline is a link, and I will give you this presentation. So, you know, don't take my word on any of this, but please do take this seriously and go start looking around for yourself. At the NIH, we had on my panel the retired president of Microsoft Canada, who's now speaking out about this issue. We had Dr. Martin Pall, who is one of the world's leading scientists. We had Theodora Scorato, who is the executive director of perhaps the largest database of information on this topic with the Environmental Health Trust, and others who came. Those talks are each under 10 minutes. So it's a really quick, credible way to learn about this issue as well. One of the gaps that existed when I fell down the rabbit hole with this issue is so many people were getting misdiagnosed, like with Joanne having neurological issues. Our healthcare teams have very rarely been trained on this. So we are so grateful that in January, we brought together world leading doctors and scientists and public health experts and building biologists to teach our healthcare teams and our first responders how to recognize what this is. Because right now, I already know one woman in Quincy and one in Bridgewater who was so extraordinarily ill that they had to call 911. And rather than getting them the medical attention that they needed, they sectioned them and put them in a psych ward because they had no idea that these microwave sicknesses exist. So that's my background and how I got involved in all of this. If any of you have an iPhone with you tonight, I would invite you to take it out now. And I want to walk you through where the fine print is in our very own devices, because it's been there all along. And very few of us know that this legal disclaimer is in there. So if you own an iPhone, please go into settings and then scroll down just a little bit and hit general. And on old phones, you then hit about, but most have upgraded to a newer phone. So scroll all the way down to the bottom of general. And second from the bottom, you'll see legal and regulatory. And this little acronym GAL might help you to remember where to find it later, like this gal joined our conversation. From legal and regulatory, you'll see a little list at the top, and 5 or 6 down, you'll see RF exposure, which is this radio frequency radiation emissions of these electromagnetic fields. In that legal fine print, it tells us a couple of really important things. One, they tested this device at a distance from the body. So don't put these devices anywhere on your body. And unfortunately, they never actually did biological testing. 2, it tells you to use a hands-free option, because without being forthright and telling us, every time you put a cell phone up to your head or a tablet in your lap or a wearable on your body, you are receiving microwave radiation, sending and receiving from 5 or 6 separate antennas that are in that device. And tonight's message is certainly not no technology. We know how to have excellent technology, but it's high time we be given the right to choose. So when I figured all this out, my brain goes right towards solutions, and I was the grant coordinator for our public schools. And so I thought, let's get a grant. There are measurement devices that can show us what this invisible toxin looks like and sounds like in our own spaces. So I went after a grant and I received funding to put a radiation detection meter on loan in our public library. And I'd like to give you a quick demonstration on that. So this is a meter that Joanne and I actually used to do a walkthrough of the north end, and I'll show you those results shortly. See how it's blinking in the green area? In my home, because I figured this out, I have fast, reliable, secure technology, but without the radio frequency radiation. Watch what happens when I take my phone out of airplane mode. I leave it in airplane mode as my default because I know that otherwise I'll have all this radiation. But watch what happens when I turn my phone back on. Right? And most of us won't feel this immediately, but the effects are cumulative. So my goal is to get to as low as reasonably achievable. So that just went up to 140,000 microwatts per square meter, which is extraordinarily high. But once I turned off those antennas, I'm back into a rather safe zone again. So here in Ashland, we loan one of these meters out through our library. When we did our medical conference, I met a doctor from Newton, and we both flew all the way out to California for that first medical conference and met there, came back and got a Massachusetts Cultural Council grant and put one of these devices on loan in the public library in Newton. So anybody with a Minuteman library card can buzz over to Newton and borrow that meter because it was funded with state monies. As Joanne mentioned, Pittsfield has been addressing the wireless issue, and they are now getting a meter for their library as well. So what does the science tell us? In the short term, many people are experiencing microwave sickness symptoms that they would never think to connect to their wireless devices. Our own government, through the Americans with Disabilities Act, already recognizes these electromagnetic sensitivities and says that we should be offering accommodations. Insomnia is a big one because our brain in the wee hours of darkness is meant to release melatonin from the pineal gland to go in and regulate our sleep, to do cleanup and repair in our body. But our brain can't distinguish between natural light and this light energy form that's microwave radiation pulsing at us at billions and millions of cycles a second. So our brain thinks the light's on. So this is one of the greatest items to learn. Turn everything off at night. I know in my own family with my mother out in Oregon, as soon as we just shut everything off at night, people started sleeping through the night again. So insomnia is a big one, nightmares as well. These stabbing, searing headaches that doctors can't quite seem to figure out, nosebleeds and ear bleeds. The science also shows us that our blood should be the consistency of red wine. And when we're exposed to routers, to cell phones, to tablets, to utility smart meters, it starts glomming together with something called the rouleau effect, where the red blood cells magnetize and then they can't free float and get into oxygenate our systems where they need to be. So oxidative stress is a really big issue here. Chronic fatigue, pain from unidentified sources, skin rashes, heating, flushing. When I have this conversation, a lot of people say, yeah, my ear gets really hot. Or with me, my pinky finger starts to tingle if I'm holding an active device. Rashes are also very common. And nerve ending getting jiggity. There's a guy in Framingham who figured out what was going on when his cell phone kept being stored in his pants pocket, and then the nerves in his legs started going funny. Heartbeats that are too fast or too slow. Cognitive impairment is a big one because this is a neurotoxin. And then anger and behavior issues. At the medical conference, several of the doctors commented that because this is a neurotoxin, we can probably expect to see more of these anger outbursts and mass shootings that we have been seeing over the last decade or so. And then even pre-pandemic, we were already at epidemic proportions of anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, and we pulse this radiation at our cells day and night. So those are some of the more common short-term symptoms. In the long term, child and adult cancers. This study over here is the US National Toxicology Program, which 20 years ago set out to see if cell phones could be harmful. And at the end of their research in 2018, they determined clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. And clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. The industry, as every good study comes out, will spin it and say something like, oh, that's just one study. You need more than one to validate that this is right. Well, right on the heels of the US study, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy came up with another large study that corroborated everything that we found here. DNA damage, which is the very roadmap to grow a proper human, plant, pollinator, anything. It was actually the infertility studies that got me on my feet. I went and started reading the scientific literature. They've taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas turned on, and it slowed the motility. It caused far fewer sperm to be viable, and it changed the DNA in just 4 hours of exposure. And we in the US and our other industrialized nations, we are down 50% on our sperm count right now, hovering right at the brink of where we are not going to be able to reproduce our species before too long if we don't get ahead of this. And as I talked about, the neurotoxicity is feeding into all of these diseases. And then children are not simply little adults. Their skulls are thinner. Their brains have a higher water content, and they are biologically absorbing more radiation into their brains than even you and I, and it's not good for us. So when we think about where is all this coming from, let's look at the points of emission. All of our personal devices, unless we know to turn off the antennas, the utility smart meters for water, gas, electric, and solar, the cell towers, the big ones that we started with in industrial parks that have now been encroaching closer and closer and can now be put on buildings, as Joanne said. And now these small cell antennas, of which there are many already installed at the curb in your neighborhood. I think Joanne did a walkthrough and counted 39 of them in the North End. So what does the scientific literature tell us? The green level would be less than 0.1 microwatts per meter squared or square meter. Slight concern, 0.1 to 10, severe concern, 10 to 1,000, extreme concern, anything over 1,000. And Joanne and I participated in an international study that's collecting data throughout every country that we can embrace into this study. It's being run by Dr. Magda Havas out of Professor Emeritus from Trent University in Canada. And this is what the North End readings were. The lowest reading that we got was 33,000 and the highest was 613,000. And this was just walking down Hanover Street at 5 intersections that we measured. So why don't we know about this? I kept scratching my head thinking, surely if this is as bad as we've been told in the science, somebody must have our backs on this. And then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics put out this report called Captured Agency, how the FCC is dominated by the industries it presumably regulates. And this tells us this is basically the big tobacco playbook all over again. Suppress the evidence of harm, do your own studies that show no harm, seduce your politicians with deep pockets and heavy lobbying, and promote your sexy products and everybody's gonna buy them.
So Cece, what is it that we should do? Can you tell us, as we're getting tight on time?
Okay,
Kind of
so
what are the steps I
Here's
need
what
to
Martin
kind of get to that
Luther
point.
King Jr. taught us. When we finally get to fixing things in society, it comes through public engagement, the courts rule, and public policy. And I'll leave you guys with this to look at more closely. But please know the city of Boston knows about this. They've already been filing with the FCC. They tried to sue the FCC. Burlington already put a small cell policy in place that you may want to look at to start putting protections in place. And it's being used as a national example all across the country. Other towns are adopting it. And then here's that Pittsfield Forum as well. The FCC had an opportunity to reevaluate their public radiation exposure limits, and they completely ignored the science. So now they're being sued by the Environmental Health Trust, the Children's Health Defense, which is run by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and his group is also suing for changing the law so that the industry doesn't even have to get permission anymore. They can go right to a homeowner and say, here, we'll give you this great incentive. You'll have great 5G if you just put this antenna on your roof, which is going to impact everybody in there as well as all of your neighbors. It's going to pulse out to the whole neighborhood. So the first thing you want to do is learn about this and not allow these folks into your neighborhood. There are other legal actions. I helped to get a law passed in New Hampshire in less than a year. And in November, they came out with a commission report. They had very highly respected experts weigh in on this. And they're calling out the industry corruption, and they make 15 recommendations for safe technology. And then here in Massachusetts, we have 11 bills that are directly sponsored by legislators this session. This one would allow us to do a commission like New Hampshire did. This one would allow us to opt out of those toxic utility smart meters that are being mounted on our homes. And this one would start protecting our poor kids in the school from these mesh Wi-Fi systems that are everywhere now.
This is
So
great.
personally,
A couple of questions. Does anyone have any questions?
all right, I know it's like drinking water out of a fire hose when you first learn about it.
It's a lot to take in, and I think people would have some questions.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they do for you.
But let me just show you a picture of what you can do to do what I did in my
Can I
house.
open your mic?
In the back of your router, just plug an Ethernet cable into it. Get one that's shielded. It has a foil liner so that the electric and magnetic fields don't bleed out into your living area. You can get a little switch if you have multiple wireless devices. It's like an extension cord. And then just get the shorter cables with adapters. Who knew? You can actually hardwire a cell phone. You can hardwire a laptop, and then just go in and turn off all those antennas and keep using your landline when you're not on the go. You can forward your cell phone to your landline. But we have professional training. We have all sorts of resources once you know about this. So I would be overjoyed to come back and do a real forum with you to really get into this.
So we have a question from Jen Crampton. I'd like to get in one or two questions
Sure.
because we're running late. Go ahead, Jen.
Hi, I just wanted to ask, and maybe it's for Cecilia or maybe it's for Joanne. In our neighborhood, as you showed with the readings that you took, the cell phone companies have been very generous with installing their repeaters throughout our space. Is there anything we can do about that now, or is it like the city was complicit in doing that? They allowed it. All those posts on Hanover Street and other streets have these repeaters on them, and it was kind of just shoved in our faces and nobody asked permission.
Yeah,
So
that's what the industry does. They bank on people not knowing. They stand behind this old law from 1996 called the Telecom Act, and they say, oh, it's coming, there's nothing you can do about it, which is actually disinformation. Towns that tune into this can strengthen their bylaws and codify protections. You can't, by law, claim health issues, but there's a lot you can do with aesthetics. There's a lot you can do to put in setbacks. But it is difficult once they go up. So that's why it's important to support those who are bringing the lawsuits against the FCC to change the public radiation exposure limits. And support the bills in Massachusetts to force our legislature to look at this, because I think we have some sticky situations in our legislature as well. I presented the same information in Massachusetts, as I did in New Hampshire. We got a bill passed into law in 7 months. We've had legislation here for 10 years in Massachusetts. So people have to show up to make this change happen.
This has been really, really informative. Thank you very much, both Joanne and Cece. Does anyone else have another question? And Cece, and Joanne, we record this, so these slides will be on our website.
Okay, and I will go ahead and drop into the chat a link to my slides. And again,
Great.
don't take my word on it, but please reach out if there's anything more I can do, or if you want to bring me in and we'll have a more full discussion.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. Now everybody put your cell phone away, far from you.
Or just put it in airplane mode when you're not using it.
Yeah, no, it's great advice. Thank you very much, both of you. That was a lot of work, and we really appreciate you taking the time to educate us about this. Our next guest, I am going to open his mic, is a candidate for at-large city council, David Halbert, who's going to talk to us about his platform and his vision for Boston and take some questions. David, why don't you start? I just opened your mic. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself to get started and why you're running, and tell us your platform, please.
Absolutely. Well, Cheryl, thank you so much. Thank you to each and every one of you for being here this evening. You know, I always say you can tell what people care about by where they spend their time and they spend their money. So I appreciate you taking the time to contribute and be part of the community and part of this conversation. Once again, my name is David Halbert, and I'm running to be one of your 4 at-large city councilors. And the reason that I'm running is because I believe that Boston is an absolutely incredible city, and it is full of opportunities. But unfortunately, we know those opportunities aren't shared equally by everyone. You know, as a person who lives in this city, as a Black man who lives in the city, I understand what it is at times to have a government that feels like it's looking around you or past you or through you, sometimes even at you with suspicion. But I also know that when we affirm and bring people together, when we celebrate the diversity that makes our city so great, and we bring all those voices to the table, we can really have innovative, progressive policies that are going to help push our city into the future, that are going to allow us to take our values and turn them into actual practical results here on the ground. The kind of results that allow us to say that housing should be a human right in the city, that everyone should have the ability to be here in safe, affordable housing, regardless of what neighborhood they live in. The kind of decisions that we can make that can invest in economic equity in our city and making sure that we're lifting up all and allowing everyone to benefit from the robust economy that we've had for so many years, particularly our small businesses, because our small businesses are critical. They're not just places in our neighborhoods that we go to spend money, but they really provide the fabric and the character of so many of our neighborhoods. Right? For our immigrant community, they provide a first step towards the American dream. And for those individuals who are coming back from incarceration, it's often those small businesses led by people who they grew up with, people who they were coached with in Little League or sat next to in pews in church, that provide them with that second chance, that chance to reinvest in themselves and to make them and their families and their neighborhoods whole. And it's how we talk about education equity in our city, making sure that every child of the 50,000 plus that are part of Boston Public Schools has access to a high quality education and getting all the supports they deserve. And I say that not just as a candidate, but because the most important job that I have in this world is being a father to 2 beautiful little girls, a 5-year-old who, if she was here, would tell you proudly she's a K2 Tiger, and we're a proud BPS family. And because I want to make sure that all children have that same opportunity that I want for her and for her sister. That we can do that, and we can face so many more challenges that are facing the city, whether we're talking about the impact of climate change on our climate vulnerable city, whether we're talking about what public safety looks like here in Boston, or how we affect transportation and make sure that it's equitable once again across the city. We can do this if we work together. And I know that because I have the experience that brings me to that point. I've been in public service for over 15 years, including on the city council as a staff member, learning up close and personal what this job is and what it isn't. Understanding that you have to balance the big ideas that are going to be transformative with those small things that are just as critical in terms of our quality of life, making sure that the potholes get filled, that the trash gets picked up, that the lights get turned on. Because if you do that, you can answer the most important question that should drive any public servant, which is, how can I make somebody's life better today? Every decision should flow from that. I truly believe that. And that's why I'm so excited to be out here on the campaign trail, to be able to have conversations with groups just like this and folks just like you about the future of our city. Because if we work together in partnership, we can build a Boston, not just the kind of Boston that we want to have, but truly the kind of Boston that we deserve to have. So thank you so much for the invitation to be here, and I look forward to your questions.
Well, thank you very much. All right. Now, this is a group that usually has lots of questions. Do I see hands? Wave them. Come on. Kubiak. Hold on, Dave. Go, Dave.
Thank you, Dave Halbert, for being willing to come before our group. I wondered for which city councilor did you work? And then the other is, you've mentioned a lot of goals that I think most of us would join with you in supporting. Since you've been involved at the city level for some time, and I realize that there are 100 things, maybe 1,000 things that need to change little by little, day by day. But what have you seen in this city? What one or two or three things have you seen that need to change because they're preventing us from achieving the goals that you listed? Something specific.
Absolutely. Well, David, thank you so much. And I'm not just saying that because you have a really good first name. I really appreciate that question. So to your first part of it, I had the privilege of serving for City Council for John Tobin, the former District 6 City Councilor, so West Roxbury and Jamaica Plain, and Sam Yoon prior to that, so former at-large City Councilor. So I've been in both offices, understand the differentiation between the at-large office and kind of that role and mandate and the district office, as opposed to things that need to change and things that I've seen over time. I've lived in the city for 17 years, seen a lot of things happen in that time. I would say that our conversation around education, once again, one of the reasons that it's such an important issue to me, not just as a parent, but really thinking through, once again, what the future of the city looks like. We've had a conversation that's been dominated. All the oxygen's really been sucked out of the room by 3 schools, largely, and particularly by 1 school. And while those schools, of course, need investment and they are jewels of our system, they are not by any means the only schools in our system. So I think expanding that conversation around education and what we can do in being innovative around education in the city is something where we need to take a bold step. There are a few ideas that I have and I've put out there, and they're on my website as well, about ways that we can make those investments in practical ways. The first is making sure that we have universal access to K0 and K1 education. We know how important and how foundational it is for early education access for every student, right, in terms of their development, their socialization, and their prospects going forward. So we need to make sure that there is universal access through BPS for that, for all families. That's absolutely critical, and particularly as we come out of the impact of the pandemic and seeing children that have been isolated from others for so long. And the second is looking at our physical infrastructure of our schools, right? Some of them are incredibly old. When we've seen, especially in this past week, where we've had, a heat wave come through, and I can't tell you how many stories I've seen and how many folks I've talked to who are worried generally about the children that are in these schools in 90, 95, 100-degree weather, trying to learn. I mean, it's hard enough just to try to focus, let alone trying to actually receive a quality education. And that's not good for the students, it's not good for the staff and the individuals who work there. So we need to make sure that we're making those physical infrastructure investments as well. We also have to bring innovation to all the schools. 2 areas in particular in the high school level that I think we can do a lot. The first is I'd love to see a program modeled off of Northeastern's co-op program, where I went and got my master's degree, where we take that to each and every high school in the city and we partner them with city departments and ideally with nonprofit and for-profit partners as well, allowing students to have an opt-in program where they can get their first steps at a head start, if you will, on a career. I'd like to see a school like Brighton High School, for example, where you could partner with the City Treasury Department, the Boston Foundation, and Eastern Bank, and have it be finance high and have kids go there because that's what they want to do, giving students and families more of a reason to invest. And finally, I'd like to really see a new focus on Madison Park High School as our city's vocational high school. It's absolutely critical that we invest, and we should have a high quality and high performing vocational high school. I personally think that the future for Madison Park is in us committing to making it the #1 green vocational high school in the entire country. We have every reason to do it. And particularly, I'm your former neighbor. I'm talking to you from my basement in Dorchester, but I spent my first 14 years in the city right across the water from you all in East Boston. We've all seen the pictures and heard the stories or experienced it ourselves, where they're talking about flooding or people literally kayaking on streets as opposed to the harbor. We know that the impact of climate change is a real struggle, and it's something that we're going to be facing and challenged here in the city of Boston. So we need to have a workforce, a skilled labor workforce that can quite literally help us rebuild and build a city for that future.
I'd like to follow up when you just talked about flooding and climate resiliency. In 2018, we had 2 back-to-back storms that really flooded this neighborhood severely, from the north end all the way down into Wharf District, and I'm sure Charlestown felt it and East Boston did too. Have you thought at all about how you pull this all together? I mean, we're putting together been working on putting a climate resiliency task force for the North End together. It's a lot harder to do than everyone thinks. And where does the money come from? And how do you do it? Because if we do it piecemeal, neighborhood by neighborhood, we just push the water someplace else. I don't mean to put you on the spot because it's a big job and it's not something that's going to get done overnight, yet it seems like something we need to work on pretty quickly, because if we have a hurricane or a nor'easter in the winter, we could lose our power again, lose our heat. Have you thought about that at all? Have you talked to anybody?
Absolutely. So, you're not wrong, and being put on the spot is part of this job, or at least the pursuit of it. But in all seriousness, environmentalism is a core value for me. And it's because, quite frankly, my first exposure to the North End was as a kid, coming with my mom to go to lunch, actually go to Rabia's and have my first Caesar salad back when there was a highway up and separating the neighborhood. And it's because she worked at Haymarket at the Environmental Protection Agency, spent 26 years there. And so environmental issues are critically important. As we're thinking about climate resiliency and what that's going to look like, both in terms of our building and our housing stock, we need to have a multidimensional conversation. It isn't enough to simply focus on it at City Hall. Yes, we need to have a comprehensive and a cohesive plan across the entire city, not knitting it together just neighborhood by neighborhood, but also understanding that different neighborhoods are facing different challenges. The things that we're dealing with when I lived in East Boston from an environmental standpoint are slightly different than what's happening in the North End, which are different than what's happening here in Dorchester, but we're all facing challenges related to this. So it's putting that together, but also understanding that in terms of the funding and in terms of some of the authorizations that we're going to need, we have to have good, durable working partnerships with our partners at Beacon Hill, at the state level, and particularly at the federal level in terms of funding. I look forward to the opportunity to work with your Senator Joe Boncory, who's a good friend, as well as your representative, Chairman Michaelowicz, who I've known since we were both aides at the State House, because I know how much they care about this community and that they're both forward-thinking individuals who want to engage and have good partnerships, working to make sure that we're making the kind of investments and the kind of policy decisions that are going to protect our communities.
That's great. All right, questions? Jen Crampton.
Hi, thanks
Hi.
for inviting us. I applaud your efforts in working on improving the schools. We're lucky to be here in where the Elliott is located. One of the best schools in the city, we think. And but we see a lot of schools improve when parents come together and do the fundraising and spend the time to make their school great. And it's really sad to see that isn't happening across the city. How can you expect it to happen across the city? Not everyone has the time or the money to put into it. And really working on the Boston schools from the inside out and having Boston make the schools great rather than parent-led groups making, individual schools great would be so amazing to see. And having a path to keep people in the city for high school now that the whole exam school thing is turned into kind of a gong show would be amazing. But my actual question is regarding the Zoning Board of Appeal and the BPDA. We've seen just a parade of things happen over the past several years and even recently over the last several months, where developers are just coming in and doing whatever they want and getting rubber stamped by these agencies, and that these agencies have no accountability. There isn't a separate planning agency and a separate agency that's approving projects. It's very, interconnected, and that just doesn't make a lot of sense. I think Boston might be one of the only cities anywhere that does that. So I'm wondering what your viewpoint is on changing that and improving the way that the Zoning Board of Appeal hears and approves and is governed. So that's kind of a big question, but if you have a short answer, that would be awesome.
No, it's no problem, Jennifer. Thank you so much for the question. I've long been on the record as saying that I believe that the BPDA should be split into two separate agencies, one focused on economic development, one focused on planning, for just this kind of reason. When I was a staff member, I actually served, and one of my roles was, particularly when I worked for Council Union, was going to the zoning board and being the council's representative there for when we needed to make comments and just hearing what was going on. And I saw neighborhood after neighborhood come up, and sometimes they got what they wanted, but a lot of times they felt like they got run over. And that started started with their interactions with the BPDA. Look, I have a lot of friends who work at the BPDA. They're good people. They don't want to hurt the city, but often I think the decision-making process, because of them being a combined agency, we see economic development overrun planning and community input time after time after time, which is not what we want. We should have them separated out, making their cases to the individuals for oversight purposes that they need to make, and letting hopefully good planning also coincide with a robust economic development model. We can do it. Cities do it all across the country each and every day. There's no reason why Boston shouldn't be able to join in that same effort. So I firmly believe that those agencies should be split into two. I think on the Zoning Board of Appeals, what I'd love to see is the full adoption of Councilor Edwards' proposal about changing the composition of the zoning board, right? Making it more community oriented, giving it a different kind of perspective and a different viewpoint. I think she's very forward thinking in that, and I would support her in that as a member of the council, as a colleague there, as I do as a private citizen. I also think it's about information, right? Particularly in our neighborhoods, we see that a lot of times in these conversations, especially where we have neighborhoods where folks are moving in, they don't have a history about what's happened in their communities. I think the city should have a searchable, public-facing online database where you can see all the development projects and you can break it down by ward, by precinct, by neighborhood, and you can see it over time to see what the impact of those developments have been on a community. How many units have been added to a neighborhood? How many parking spaces have been added to a neighborhood? When somebody gets there and they have in one of these meetings, it's not that this one small project is being, irrationally fought against. It's because that project is actually the straw that broke the camel's back, because instead of it being 3 units that's being added to a neighborhood, that's actually the 101st to 103rd unit that have been added in the last couple of years. But I think having that grounding in a trustworthy sense and set of data and data points is critical, not just for the neighborhood, but for the city, and quite frankly, for our development community as well. So they can make the best intentional, hopefully community-focused conversations and projects and plans that they can. The more transparency that we have, the better off we're all going to be.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more question because I don't see anybody with a hand up. Councilor Edwards filed today to have the city council have direct input into the budget, which would be the first time. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, like I said at the beginning, where you spend your time. Oh, yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's a big move. It's the first time that the council would be able to have direct input. It's just so everybody knows, the mayor really has control over the budget, but now the council would be very involved and we'd all have input to our councilors. Absolutely. Well, as I was saying, where you spend your time and your money shows what you care about. And that's why the city budget is the most important document that comes out of City Hall, right? It's where we put our city's funds and, about the things that we actually want to support and to grow and the initiatives that we want to see become successful. I think it's really important. I would actually take it a step further, quite frankly. I believe that the city council should be, have the responsibility, not just the power, but truly the responsibility to craft a responsible, independent budget as the legislative branch of city government in a similar fashion of what we see at the state level and at the federal level, and then to work with the mayor, who would also create their own budget as the executive branch and come to a consensus and an accord of what that is actually going to look like, do the hard work of governance to create a document that really speaks to the needs of our entire city. Look, the mayor, and by the way, it's whomever that mayor is, not just a particular person, but really whoever sits on that side of the 5th floor is only one individual. But when everything in city government is in support of that individual's vision, we are, by nature and by structure and design, limited by that person's perspectives. One of the values of the city council is, by being 13 different individuals with 13 different lived experiences and perspectives and communities that they represent, we have more perspectives, more input. And so it hopefully minimizes some of those blind spots that each of us have because we don't walk in each other's shoes each and every day. I think having that perspective and empowering the city council, and once again, providing them with that responsibility to make and create that kind of a budget in a responsible fashion will lead to a better overall outcome. So I'm in support of the work that Councilor Edwards is doing, and I would love to see it take a step further. Great, thank you very much. Does anyone have another question? Otherwise, we are going to move over to ZLC. Well, thank you very much for coming and talking to us tonight. We really appreciate it. And thank you, Annika. I see you on here too. Yes, Annika, my campaign managers here. Thank you all for having me. I really appreciate it. I believe Annika had put our campaign information in the chat. I hope you all stay connected with us. Looking forward to hopefully seeing you all out in the streets over these next few months. And of course, asking for your vote on September 14th. Thank you. Thank you very much, David. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to open up Victor's mic and Bill Ferrulo. You're both going to be open. And Bill, you're open. So the two ZLC items, I'm going to turn over to Victor, but Victor, just so you know, Bill Ferrulo is here, not Ryan Goss. Victor, is your audio working? Oh, hold on. Let's open you up again. Open your mic.
Okay.
There you go. You're all set.
I should be unmuted now, right?
You are. We can hear you. We've got
Okay.
209 Endicott and 142 Prince. Well, Victor, Victor, your mic got closed again. All right, let's start with, I opened your mic again, Victor, but let's start with 209 Endicott. All right, your mic is open, Victor, go ahead.
Okay, well, I see Bill Ferrulo.
Yes, Bill is here representing them, both of them tonight. Both
All right.
209 Endicott and 142 Prince.
Okay, let's go forward. Which one are we going forward?
Bill, do you have slides? Or are you just gonna, do you want to share? The screen is open if you want to share.
We had provided plans. I don't know if you guys have made them into slides, but I don't have slides per
No,
se.
don't have them. Why don't you just tell us what's going on? What they're looking for.
Well, let me introduce myself. I'm Bill Ferrulo, and I am the attorney for the Benetti family, which is the 209 Endicott Street proposal before you tonight. The Benettis have owned this family. This is the third generation of Benettis in the building. The building actually had been a 5-unit building, but the Benetti family used the first and second floor as a single apartment. And somewhere in the 50s, early 60s, it became classified as a 4-unit building. It's a 5-story building, but used as a 4-unit. We're proposing now to change that occupancy back to 5 dwelling units, renovate the entire building, and add a roof deck. The existing building has an existing head house that's there. That's not going to change. It'll simply be renovated. And there will be a deck on the roof, which is 130 square feet of space that will be used solely by Michael Benetti Jr., who is also on this Zoom this evening. To explain, we have several violations as a result of the changes going from a 4 to a 5, and I'll go through those. Part of doing this is we're going to take some of the space in the basement, which is about 300 square feet, and use it to duplex the first floor with the basement to make a unit that had been, the first floor unit had been approximately 500 square feet. Now it'll be just over 800 square feet, making a little bit more space and livable in that unit. To do that, the basement area is lower than 8 feet, but the first floor is almost 10 feet high. So the area that we're going to use in the basement will have the floor adjusted so that the basement will have a full 8-foot height and the first floor will have an 8-foot height. The violations that we will be going to the board for are as follows. One is floor area ratio. We are adding that extra square footage in the basement, which takes us from a current floor area of 3.22 to a proposed floor area of 3.52. We would be expected to add open space when you add a unit, but we don't have any additional open space, meaning we're not doing any balconies or anything of that sort. And the only open space that we're creating on the roof deck is going to be an owner occupied unit by Mr. Benetti, strictly for his use. So we have the open space violation. The third is also related to adding the unit, and that's the off-street parking. As you add a unit, you are required to provide off-street parking, but any building in the north end is impossible to do that. So there is no off-street parking. The reason we have the fourth violation for roof structure restriction is the way Article 54, Section 18 is written about adding to buildings or restructuring buildings, restructuring rooftops, is that they recommend the use of a hatch for access to a roof deck, but this has an existing head house, the result of which is that head house incurs the roof structure restriction. We're not adding to the height of the building, and we're not really changing the outline of the roof at all. As I said, the head house will remain as it is. So the final result is that we'll have one unit that will be based on the first floor, and that'll be approximately 830 square feet. And then units 2, 3, 4, and 5 are roughly 558 square feet. And those are one-bedroom units. The duplex is a two-bedroom unit. Other than that, we would answer any of your questions. And Mr. Benetti's here as well, who can answer any questions about the history of the building.
Am I still unmuted? I guess not.
Yes, you are, Victor. You're.
Oh, I am. Okay. Well, Bill, then I have a question about
Yeah.
the roof deck. Since this is, well, is a rental or is it going to be condominiumized?
No, these are rental, and the Benetti family will retain ownership of the building.
Okay, so what I want to address is how the roof deck becomes for the exclusive use of the upper unit if it's not a condominium. Is it only accessible from the upper unit?
Because of the design of the roof deck, roof decks can be designed for either singular unit use or multiple unit use. In order to be a multiple unit use deck, you have to have two means of egress, and you have to have a certain square footage, and this has neither. In other words, it's not being designed for use for more than one unit.
Well, is it accessible by more than one unit from the common stairway, or is it accessible only by the upper unit?
No, the access is a common stairway.
Mhm.
I have a couple of questions. I guess I think you said that this was a 5-unit building. At some point in the past, it was turned into a 4-unit building by combining the top 2 floors.
No, actually, the first and second floor. David.
Oh, okay. And did that happen to be the residence of the Benettis at the time? Is that
Yes,
what?
it was.
Okay.
It was.
And then my other question is, typically, I see zoning relief needed for turning a basement into habitable space. Is that not a forbidden use at that location?
No, not a forbidden use.
Okay. And
The use of the basement is not forbidden. It's in the district, it's an allowed residential use.
okay. Victor, am I wrong in thinking that in some parts of the neighborhood, basement as a living space is forbidden?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think we've dealt with this as a violation in a number of areas, but possibly not in that particular area. And then will all of the basement become part of that unit, or will some of the basement be left as common space?
No, there's common space, and we're using about 300 square feet, and about 250 is common for storage, trash, utilities, and access by utility companies, et cetera. So we're only using a portion of it.
Does anyone else have a question? Dave, your hand lit up again. Your mic is open if you do.
Yeah, my last question is, will construction take as long as it has taken in the building across the street?
Well, I don't think we're going to knock this one down before we renovate. So our expectation is it will not take that long. Again, a full renovation in general, as you'll hear in the next proposal as well. Usually, right now, everything is busy, so they peg it at 8 to 12 months for a full renovation of a building.
Okay, do we have a motion? We need to vote on this. Victor, I'm trying to unmute you again.
Okay,
Oh, there you are. You're open.
Let
Your
me
mic is open.
now
You
I'm
wanna take a motion?
unmuted. Okay, I'll make the motion
Okay,
to vote to support or oppose the proposal. And if I can slip in, David, I've checked the table A in Article 54. A basement and first story are allowed uses, residential uses in multifamily residential district. Will someone second the motion?
I second it. And I put my email address in the chat, cdelgreco@comcast.net. You can all send me your vote here. To vote, you must be a paid member of NEWRA. Thank you very much. And Bill, you have the next one, 142 Prince.
I do.
Do.
And good evening again on behalf of the owners of this property who are with us tonight, and that would be Ingrid Bankston and Charlie Reed, who are in the Zoom. I would like to explain a proposal and some background on the building. This building is 142 Prince, and the building had been the property of the Kalia Rossetti family for a number of years and a couple of generations as well. Ingrid and Charlie had been residents in the North End before they moved to Bowden Street and had been looking for a property to come back to in the North End that they could raise a family in, and purchased this building recently, several months ago. Ingrid is an architect, and she's drawn the plans for this building. And we will walk you through what it is we're proposing. And the description as given in the Board of Appeal material is to add a fourth floor addition, which is approximately 296 square feet. There is already a rooftop addition of sorts on this building that's not used for living space, but in the future, we hope to use it for living space. And there will be a private roof deck for the top unit, which will be occupied by Ingrid, Charlie, and family. And the last part of the proposal is that the basement, which is approximately 10 feet in height and has exposure on three sides. Again, I don't know if you folks have the photographs and things that were provided with the plans, but what you see from this building is that what the so-called lower level basement, garden level, whichever you want to use, is approximately 5.5 feet above ground on the Prince Street side. But on the sides and rear of the building, it's 100% above ground with windows on the other sides of the lower level. So we're proposing to use that as living space for a unit. In addition, as David had brought up, we've saved space there for unit storage and utilities and trash storage, et cetera, in addition to the space we would be using. This building, I should say, has been a 3-unit building. We are proposing to keep it as a 3-unit building. So you'll have the lower level as a 2-bedroom apartment. And then the first level up will be another 2-bedroom apartment, so-called floor through. And then the next 2 levels and the addition at the rooftop will be a single unit occupied by the Begston Reed family as their living unit. The sizes of these are the first 2 units are 2 bedrooms. The upper unit is what is a 3-bedroom plus unit, meaning there'll be bedrooms for children. There'll also be potentially a guest bedroom use for something other than a bedroom. You would see in the plans. The use of the building in the past, as 3 units, was 1 2-bedroom unit and 2 3-bedroom units. The 2 larger units were uninhabitable at the time the building was purchased, so only 1 unit had been used for the last several years, and that was the unit up on the first floor. And Cheryl, again, they can't see the plan, I take it, as far as the top.
I don't have the plans. I mean,
Okay.
usually you guys
So-
are.
This building is a very long, deep building. We're only proposing a partial addition on the top where it currently has an addition that we believe, from the looks of it, has been used for storage and access to the roof. So the addition that's on the roof now encloses the staircase that goes up as part of the head house, and then the rest. I think Ingrid, are you able to show plans?
You should be,
Could
Ingrid. You should be able
Could you,
to.
yeah, could you unmute Ingrid for a moment, Cheryl, and
Yep.
you'll be able to show the rooftop.
Ingrid, you should be able to share.
Thank you so much. Let me just maximize my view here and I'll share. Okay.
Ingrid, if you can bring up the rooftop, which I'll hold up. There you go. That's the one I'm looking at. Okay. This is the current configuration of the rooftop of the building. That blue portion already exists. And that back portion that looks to be the shape of an L is not being built on at all. We are going back as far as the existing blue portion by filling in that space next to it. So the building, which would be to our left, has a solid brick wall. And we are not going further than that blue current addition on the roof. So that's what our proposed addition will look like when it's finished filling in that gap. And the reason for the lower portion of the deck is there's a staircase on the right-hand side. Ingrid, if you can put that, there you go. On the right-hand side that takes you up to the roof deck rather than putting a head house on the building. There is no head house on this building so that we kept the height at either just at or just below our neighboring buildings. And the deck on this is strictly for the use of the owners as part of their unit. And as mentioned, the rear portion of that rooftop will not have any decking, et cetera, on it. I think that may help understand the rooftop. So to go back to what it is we've proposed and what gets us before the Board of Appeal, what we have is we are using the space in the basement again, as was mentioned in the last proposal. So therefore our FAR increases. And our FAR in this property will be approximately 3.74. We have a roof structure restriction violation. And that is, since we're filling in that portion that is other than the blue portion of the roof, Article 5418 requires a conditional use permit in order to do any rooftop change. The last is a groundwater conservancy overlay district that will not be a violation of election compliance. We will meet with groundwater conservancy and address any issues they would like us to address as far as what happens with the water that comes off the roof, or this some open area in the back of the building, a little courtyard in the back. We will address that, and that will not be a request for any variance or conditional use. And we have provided plans to our neighbors and have spoken with them as well. I don't think I've seen them on the Zoom, but we've been doing that for the last couple of months. And other than that, once again, we will respond to questions, and Ingrid can show you other plans if you'd like to see anything else about the building.
That's good. Dave, I opened your mic.
Yeah, I'm sorry that I wasn't listening as carefully as I should have when you were describing the rooftop structures of the decks. Did you say that the deck will be on top of the new structure or at the back of the new structure?
Well, actually, it's both, David. Ingrid, if you bring that up again.
Yep, so you can see there's a smaller deck here in the back, and that's where you access the exterior stair that goes up to the top of the main deck, which is on the top of the extended head house.
Because I do have some concern about activity on the lower deck right across from folks' homes. So how, that would be my concern, that
Yeah, well,
privacy concerns as well.
understandably, but keep in mind, this is the property owner. This is not being a rental unit. The other units likely will be rental units. So it's that, and the fact that rather than adding a head house up on the upper roof, so that we bring the height up higher. For example, the current height of the building to the roof is 34.9, but to the height of the existing head house that's on that building is 43.7. So our proposal brings our roof height to 45.7. So it's roughly the same height as what is on the building now, without having to, as you see from the two adjoining buildings, they have head houses, and those head houses would add that additional height to the building.
Does anyone else have a question, follow up? Any abutters on the call? I can open your mic, Dave. You're still open if you put your hand up again. Oh, no, you're not. Hold on. There you go.
All right, so possibly no abutters in attendance tonight. I'm just curious. I believe this is directly across from the Gassy. Is that correct? And if that's correct, does this kind of a project require Boston Park's approval because it's within 100 feet of a public park?
We haven't received that notice, but the way we've designed the roof of this, it cannot be seen. The deck cannot be seen from the park. We have a buffer at the front, and the proposal, Ingrid, if you show the mock-up of the front of the building. If you look at it, the building we're talking about is right there.
Which building is it? Can you put your cursor on it? Okay, yep.
And that gray area is the addition, and then the roof deck is set back from that so that you can't see it from the park. And if in fact we are notified by the Parks Department, we will meet with them and go over that as well.
Victor, your mic's open.
Okay, Bill, do you have a hearing date for this one?
No.
And
No.
for the previous one?
No, neither one, Victor. They're not setting them until after we do the community process.
Okay, can you let me know so that we'll get a letter out in a timely fashion?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Okay, if there are no more questions, can we have a motion?
I will make the motion to vote to support or oppose this proposal.
I will second it. And again, just email me. My email's in the chat. Put it in again. If everyone can email me tonight so I can get back to Bill in the morning, that would be terrific. Does anyone have anything else? Or I will adjourn the meeting. I think we're good. I don't see any more hands. Victor, your mic's still open. Dave? Nope. All right,
Nope.
everyone. Thank you very much. It was great to
Thank
see
you, folks.
Great.
Have a good
4th of
evening.
July, and we'll see you on July 8th. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.